Hello and welcome, I am the Restless Kaiser, and once again we're modelling for advantage. Having another look at a British vehicle from the desert era as an expansion for Tanks World War II. This time another Lend-Lease vehicle, the Grant. So there were two versions of this tank, the Grant and the Lee. The Grant is its British nickname and the Lee is the American. This sprue, as we'll see in a moment, will allow us to build both. So we get our sprue, we get the cards, and we get our bit of paper. This is an interesting, you can see it painted up and someone's gone quite heavy with the washes here, and I think it works quite well. But you can see the extensive riveting on this. I don't think I like it. I mean, it's a really interesting tank, the Grant, from its very high profile. It's quite distinctive, and that's side front mounted 75mm gun. So, what does it say? Well, we get our instructions. She goes together as you would expect. The sprue, and we'll see in a moment, you can build the British or the American one, but you're only going to get instructions for the British. This pack contains an unassembled Grant tank, a Grant tank card, a hero card, one crew card, and 3 upgrade cards. The British Army fielded over 2,500 US-built Grant tanks during the North African campaign. Larger and more heavily armoured than other tanks fielded by the British, he mounted a powerful 75mm gun in the hull. The Grant also had a 37mm gun in a small turret that could engage targets that the hull-mounted gun could not. 37mm anti-tank probably sounds a bit pants, and it certainly would prove to be over time. But for the era when this tank was designed and developed, it was still perfectly competitive. I think the original intention had the 75mm gun predominantly being intended to be used as a howitzer. It might even be smoothbore, but I wouldn't bet my house on that. So Grant comes into the North African campaign at a time when we British had really been struggling against German multi-role tanks, and found that our cruiser tanks and their doctrine was really a bit of a dead end, to be honest. So the Grant, despite its high silhouette, was the kind of vehicle that we so urgently needed to bolster our forces. The sprue then. Looking at the sprue, this is a 2017 sprue, and as I say, we'll do the Grant or the Lee. We've got our tracks and our running gear, a rear plate, we've got a pair of turret pegs and a pair of cupolas for the very top of the turret. On the American version of this, on the earlier American versions anyway, there's an additional turret on top of the 37mm turret with a machine gun in for the commander. So there's a hull gun, a turret gun, and a gun on top of the turret. There are 2 versions of that turret on here, with that cupola with an open and closed version, so you could stick a commander in. But the British, you've simply got the option to cover that. They didn't use this additional turret. You got loads of little pieces of stowage on here, which is really nice, as well as ammunition boxes and fuel cans. We've got another bit of tarp, which again is a different shape and size to ones that we've seen on the Sherman and on the Crusader, which means, you know, mixing that up is just going to add a little bit of flavour to your tanks, I think. Mark them out individually. And we've got a few different ammunition boxes, including one with an axe of some description on the top. I put this together, it went together really well. You can build several versions, and you do have 2 turret pegs, and the 2 different turrets are of 2 different sizes, so you could build more than one version of this tank from a single sprue. Let's have a look at the upgrade cards then, because these cards are really what make this an expansion. So in 1942 and going into 43, the Grant was a huge force multiplier for the British against something like Panzer III with a 50mm. This was suddenly really quite powerful, but over time it became problematic. The high silhouette made it an easy target, and most of these found themselves in the Pacific theatre after 1943, because the Japanese armour was a joke, as was their anti-tank capability. It didn't matter how easy it was to hit, if what was hitting you wouldn't go through. So the Grant herself then is 14 points. She has 4 initiative, 3 firepower, 1 armour, and 4 hit points for 14 points. 3 firepower is quite low, but she has a special rule. Hull gun. When shooting, this tank may fire at an assault gun. If it does, gain +1 firepower. So she got firepower 4, which is comparable to most of the 50mm guns if she's just firing straight ahead. At 14 points, it's not terrible. And looking at our upgrades then, we'll start with our hero. We have Pip Roberts, who is a tank commander. +2 initiative during the shooting phase. This tank and friendly tanks within close range re-roll 1 defense dice. He's 10 points, but that is an ability that is not easy to get. The number of times I have rolled 5 or 6 defense dice, got nothing, and lost an expensive 50-point upgraded vehicle, such as in our second tanks battle. I'll put a link in the what's it for you if you want to watch a 1-turn game of tanks. I would definitely like an ability like that. We have a doctrine upgrade, magician on staff. 5 points. After deployment, this tank may redeploy. At the start of each turn, you may choose to gain either 2 initiative in the movement phase or 2 initiative in the shooting phase. That's good for 2 reasons. One is you've got some flexibility, although shooting in the initiative in the shooting phase is really important. But it's a doctrine, not a commander upgrade, so it's not taking up a lot of the slots where you would normally find initiative improvements. For 5 points, we have a crewman who is an SAS guide. So you can have a commando guy, an SAS guy, special forces, as part of the tank crew. This tank gains +1 armor while in cover. Interesting ability, especially considering the usefulness of remaining stationary when you're British. So those are the generic ones. We then have a -1 card, which is the Lee turret, which can only be used on a Grant tank, and you gain -1 initiative, but you gain a point. So obviously the British felt really badly about that oversized turret, or that extra cupola. Interesting. Would I give up a point of initiative for 1 point? It'd need to be a very specific situation, I think. And then finally, for 2 points, we have Quick Turn. After all tanks have moved, you may discard this card to rotate your tank and face any direction. The tank's initiative becomes 0 at the end of the turn. So if you do get outflanked, this gives you an emergency get out of jail card, and that is an engine upgrade. That was the sprue. Those were the cards. We'll have a look at a completed model and some stills of the cards themselves to look at in more detail. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, share or subscribe to this video, and if you are buying new games or new miniatures, please consider following our affiliate link to Wayland Games. It gives us a little bit of kickback and helps fund other projects for the channel.